good afternoon, and happy Monday. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this conversation. My name is Josiah Gilliam, and I'm the My Brother's Keeper coordinator in Mayor Peduto's Office of Equity. And we've been doing an ongoing series that we've called the Equity Series, where we've taken a look at different buckets of government activity and what's happening in the mayor's office and different departments, acknowledging the realities around COVID and just general life here in Pittsburgh. And today we have a really cool opportunity to talk with folks in our city planning department, their team and the kind of work that they do. And speaking personally, it's something that I've really had an excellent chance to get to know myself since joining the mayor's office. But quite frankly, before that too, because they are one of the more forward-facing and community-engaged parts of city government, though folks may not know it. So we'll get into some high-level definitions and really take the time to unpack the cool work that these interesting people do. So without further ado, we'll jump right into introductions. So Director Dash, we'll start with you. If you could, my friends, your name, your role, and then what kind of perspective you're bringing to this conversation. Why are you excited to have this chat today? Director Dash.
Sure. My name is Andrew Dash. I am the director of the Department of City Planning. And so, our department, what we do is we really work around, foundationally in land use. What the land of the city of Pittsburgh is made up of, how we develop land in the city of Pittsburgh, and how we work and listen to residents to create policy to be able to do that. And so, really interested, really excited to be able to share our work. As well as, really be able to talk about some of the recent work that we've done, specifically around public engagement.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Sophia.
Hi, my name is Sophie Robeson. I'm a neighborhood planner within the Department of City Planning. I've been with the city about 3 years now. I'm really passionate about and getting a great opportunity to work on a lot of projects related to equitable and purposeful public engagement, and kind of applying those principles to land use projects. In this role, I've led a citywide project called the Public Engagement Guide, which established guidelines and standards for how the city does engagement for long-range planning and policy projects. And that work was informed by multiple trainings with the International Association for Public Participation. I, of late, have been applying a lot of that work to the Oakland Plan, which is a neighborhood planning project to establish a vision for the future of Oakland over about the next 20 years. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later on.
Thank you so much. Christopher.
Hey, Josiah. First and foremost, thanks so much for having these important conversations around equity, and these series have been really helpful and beneficial to showcase our work as well. For those of you all that I haven't met, I am Christopher Corbett. I'm the neighborhood planner serving the East End of Pittsburgh, and recently tasked with the citywide initiatives for all things housing. My perspective on equity is the consistent practice of being inclusive throughout our work, and I would love to continue that conversation today.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Osei.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Osei Akinlotin, and I am neighborhood planner for the southeastern portion of the city. My major projects so far have been the Greater Hazelwood Neighborhood Plan, which was completed and adopted last November, which I will discuss a little later. And then, of course, right now, I'm just working on updating and enhancing the Greater Hill District Master Plan and equity work within our department. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Alex.
Hi, I am Alex Holmes. I'm the communication specialist for the department, and recently working on the new online engagement platform that the city has, Engage PGH, that will expand our equitable and accessible engagement opportunities.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a very exciting time to have this conversation, not just because there's a global pandemic and some interesting ongoing projects happening, but also there's been some new tools, some new approaches that have been brought to bear recently. Director Dash, I'd like to start with you, sir. If you could just help us frame this conversation. You gave a really good overview in your introduction around that this work is related to land use. And I wondered if you could just explore a little bit more for folks on the call, what the department does and what are some of the relevant projects that are taking place in the city are.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josiah. So, like I said, the department is really focused around land use and being able to kind of regulate land use across the city. And so, we do so really focused, on issues of sustainability, of equity, of opportunity. To work with residents and listen to residents to develop policy, to develop projects like some of the ones that some of our planners will talk about today. As well as the review of development. So, the public commission, some places that you'll see us are, the public commissions like our Planning Commission, our Zoning Board of Adjustment, our Contextual Design Advisory Panel, the Historic Review Commission, the City County Task Force on Disabilities, or the City's Art Commission. And so these are all places where the department holds more of a review function. So we're reviewing applications that are coming to us and really trying to make sure that those fit within the city's goals. And so some of the work that we'll talk about today and in the upcoming equity series is really focused on, more of the policy side of how we start to understand what the city's goals are, what residents' goals for their neighborhoods are, and how we can translate those into policy. And so we do that with the various divisions that are in city planning. The Community Affairs Division is one that we share with the mayor's office, and they're ones that are on the ground responsive to community meetings and the like. We have our Public Art and Civic Design Division, which, like I said, oversees the Art Commission. They also oversee all of the works of public art that we have across the city. We have our Sustainability and Resilience team, which I know have been focus of one of the equity series that we've had in the past. And they really focus on really big picture goals around climate and climate action, as well as the city's resilience strategy. And we have our Zoning and Development Review team. And like I said, they're the ones that are reviewing building applications, helping to work through the review process. And then most of the folks that are in this group are part of our strategic planning team. And so they're the neighborhood planners that all serve specific geographies and are working with neighborhoods to implement the city's neighborhood planning program, which is something that working with the mayor, we've created over the last 4 years, have started to, by completing the first phase of those neighborhood plans in Uptown with the Eco Innovation District, in Hazelwood and Homewood, which Osei and Christopher will talk about, as well as in Manchester and Chateau, and are currently working on neighborhood plans in that second phase of the neighborhood planning program in Oakland and the Hill District, which I know that Sophie and Osei had spoken of already. And really the idea of the neighborhood planning program is that as development is coming to these neighborhoods, we really want to make sure that we've listened to residents and stakeholders in those neighborhoods and created a vision for those neighborhoods that then development is coming in and following. And so, but then the question comes as to how we do that and how do we engage with residents and how do we understand what it is that people want to see and how do we collect those voices and lead those and turn those into policy. And so that's where Sophie will talk about work that we've done with the public engagement guide to start to create some standards and some understanding around what engagement looks like in the city. And Alex will talk about the Engage PGH platform, which is, as of last week, newly released, and the way that understanding that a lot of our work was, around engagement was really driven by face-to-face engagement. In that, a lot of our work really came out of community meetings, out of focus groups, out of a lot of things where people were meeting face-to-face and understanding just the changes relative to COVID and the pandemic. We're not able to do that in the same way right now, and nor do people want to be able to do that with us right now, and that's okay. But we developed the Engage platform not only to be able to engage with people during this period of time, but understanding that there is a large section of the city that we're not engaging in face-to-face public meetings and that want to be engaged and want to be able to provide their input. And we want to be able to collect, and listen to as many Pittsburghers as possible while we're developing these plans. And so we see the Engage PGH platform being something that we will continue to use, even when we go back to also doing in-person and face-to-face meetings to be able to be more transparent and engage more people through the process.
That's terrific. I want to get to the public engagement guide in just a second, but just taking advantage of having you on the call, sir. I shared this story, during our prep, but I have this distinct memory of getting to know the work that you all do, and like the URA and these others when I was a representative of a community-based organization, and there had been a table set to allow direct input into the process. And I remember being at the table and kind of like Googling, like, what is the Affordable Housing Task Force? Like, what is the URA? This is not to suggest that I wasn't paying attention, but I was just very curious about how the pieces connect here. We've had a couple conversations, as you mentioned, about the resilience team, the sustainability work. We also have had a conversation with the Housing Authority and the URA. Could you describe like how you work with these other facets of governmental agencies with this work, with land use and development and things like this?
Sure. So, I think that some of the planners will talk about the experiences in particular neighborhoods, yeah. But more generally, the Department of City Planning has to work hand in hand with those organizations as we are developing these plans. And so, understanding and collecting resident input and having residents engage with us on policy choices is absolutely important to the work that we do. But we have to be working with our partner organizations to understand the programs that they have, or the programs that they can create, as to how we can use resident voices to then be able to affect change, not only that the Department of City Planning is doing, but our redevelopment authority when it comes to development of property that are in these neighborhoods, whether it is the Housing Authority and development that they're doing, whether it is our Department of Public Works and improvements that they're making, or our Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. And so, really the intent of these planning processes, whether these be our neighborhood plans, whether these be things that we're doing at a citywide scale, is really to understand resident input, have residents engage with us, but also, marry that with the practitioners that are doing work in these fields beyond us, and trying to make sure that we're able to have a collective vision, so that the city's vision for a neighborhood or for itself around this particular topic like housing is one that is married with these citywide goals through things like the Climate Action Plan, but also the programs and policies that we have or that we can create.
Thank you so much. Sophie, I'd like to turn to you to talk about the public engagement guide. And I'd like, if we could, just to start with kind of a definition, if you would. And Director Dash has teed this up nicely. But say that Josiah was now Googling what this was, and you were Google or the search engine. How would you describe what this idea is, and then walk us through what it looks like?
Yeah, so there's long kind of very technical definitions of public engagement, public participation, public input. My favorite way of thinking about it is the International Association for Public Participation has this spectrum of engagement that goes from inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. Often when we think about public engagement, we think about actually the empower engagement, which is where you're delegating a decision to the public. You're letting whoever's in the room make the decision that's going to go forward. But that's not always the correct level of engagement for a project you're working on. Sometimes you're working on something that's really technical, and so you need experts who can kind of establish the parameters within which the public can inform the outcome. And so for me, in general, all engagements to be a proper engagement means that you are consulting with a group of people, and you're going to change your outcome based on that consultation. The extent to which you change your outcome based on that consultation has to be appropriate to the project. And something that we're really working on is saying that more isn't always better. Quality is really what we're going for. We're trying to do a lot of the work before we go to the public and say, how can we, in a respectful way, acknowledge the expertise of the public and give them a path to influence this project? And that's where sometimes the different levels of engagement on that spectrum can be really helpful. So for example, most of our neighborhood plan projects are at the collaborate level, which is just about one step down from empower, because those are really involved projects. But maybe a streetscape planning project where you have, you know, smaller budget, there's clear things you have to do. Maybe that's more a consult or involved level. And the other kind of last thought on that is that all engagements have to be cumulative on the spectrum. And I think this is really important, is that if you're doing a consultation where you're empowering people, you still have to inform them, and you can't do the other. And so it's sort of this constant process that's actually a lot more complicated than oftentimes we give engagement time for. And that's where the collaboration between myself and Alex, who's our communications specialist, is so powerful, because I'm not a communications expert. And so having her there to create that balance and create a product that's really sort of closes the loop on communication is a piece that's often missing.
So thank you so much. Walk us through the public engagement guide. How did this come about, and then what's in it?
Yeah, so the public engagement guide actually started about 2.5 years ago. I was working on the city comprehensive plan, which is a whole other project that's looking to establish a long-range citywide vision for the next 20, 30 or so years. Most cities in America have a comprehensive plan. We have a version of one and are looking to update it going forward. And we were kind of grappling with this idea that how can we talk to people about these huge ideas? You know, where do you want to see change in Pittsburgh? That's a hugely loaded question. How do we ask that question if we don't know how people want to be asked that question? Was sort of the thing we were struggling with. And we looked to other cities like Austin, Texas, and Seattle, Washington, who had created frameworks for how they do public engagement. We looked at, so Austin was a great example, Seattle, Salt Lake City, Minneapolis, all of these cities have some sort of approach to public engagement that they ascribe to. And so we said, you know, we should have one of those too. And we gleaned sort of the pieces that were most relevant to Pittsburgh. And then we established a working group of about 29 people that met over the course of like 4 or 5 months in late 2017 to early 2018. Through that process, we established goals for public engagement for the city of Pittsburgh. I'm not going to remember all those off the top of my head, but they're sort of increasing equity, increasing transparency, things like that. And then we established a requirement that all long-range planning and policy projects create what we're calling public engagement plans. And this is really a big step forward, and it's a pretty big capacity lift for departments and staff. And what it requires is that staff write down why they have to do engagement for a project, what they're going to achieve through that engagement. So they're setting clear expectations with the public around, if you show up to this engagement, these are the avenues through which you can contribute. And this is actually what we're going to do with your information. Your information you're giving us, it's not going into a void. It's not going into a black hole. And then at the end, the public engagement plans require that all engagements are tracked and posted online for complete transparency. So we have an engagement report that all engagements have to fill out afterwards that sort of says, where was it hosted? How many people came? Is there a link? What were the major things that were brought up? This sort of stuff. And the neat part of it is that it went through our planning commission process. And so all public engagement plans are to be reviewed by our planning commission every 6 months throughout a planning project to sort of give that public avenue for feedback and also keep our commission abreast of what we're up to.
That's terrific. So can we speak to the transition in thought to what gets us to this Engage PGH platform and this new project? And from your view, given the rigor of these plans and how it gets to the neighborhood level, what kind of pivots have been necessary in the COVID era to ensure that you're still tracking with these goals and the intention behind them in a time where, to Director Dash's point, we can't get folks together to be in person in a reliably safe way?
Yeah. So, and I think this is also very much an equity question, because the way that we see public engagement happening in a very traditional way is not always very accessible, and it's not always very transparent. And you can do your absolute best effort, but not everybody can always come to an in-person meeting. Right. And we were sort of, as we were working on the public engagement guide, it was clear that we needed to think about online engagement, but we didn't really have the resources at the time to say, okay, how do we actually do that and how do we do it well? And so in some ways, COVID has opened up the doors to allow us to really dive down that path and think about it critically. Long term, as Director Dash noted, the goal would be to do in-person and online engagement in parallel. That's really what the most equitable and successful outcome would be. And so we have established the Engage PGH platform with the idea that this is a short-term intervention that's also going to achieve long-range goals. And I think Alex can speak to sort of that in more detail. But it definitely, the digital engagement site does a lot for achieving the goals of the public engagement guide. It's, it's such a lower barrier to entry for, a single mom who's, maybe working a night job, something like that, to come to a traditional public meeting might have been completely out of reach. And now you need one smart enabled device in an entire household in 10 minutes, if that, to go onto this website and just provide input. And I get it as a project manager the exact same way. And that's really powerful. And I think that we have to continue monitoring how people engage on the site, the demographics of the people that we're reaching on the site and how they're different from our in-person engagements. And it's going to be an iterative process. We're going to continue figuring out what's working, what's not working, where we can improve, and how we can continue to reach a more representative population of the city of Pittsburgh.
That's terrific. So Alex, walk us through it. So we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and we have all of these active projects and a chance to figure out how we engage online in a meaningful way, in an accessible way, to Sophie's point, and in a way that can be iterative over time. So it's not just a static one attempt and that's it. How do you explain how this all came about and walk us through it?
Yeah, as Sophie said, the public engagement guide laid that foundation for us, and we wanted to build on that and grow it into the digital world, expand the audiences that we can reach with all of our engagement activities. And then COVID happened, and that transition happened faster because our abilities to have those traditional methods were no longer available. So we knew that the 7 p.m. meetings, when you also have to take care of a family, or the daytime workshops when you also work, aren't always options. And so the online portal lets people go in when they have time, whenever they're available on a phone or a computer, to participate in all of our projects. And so we looked at ways that we can expand that reach. And in COVID, it lets us reach residents where they are and adjust our projects to the current needs of all of the communities that we serve. Post-pandemic, as both Director Dash and Sophie have said, Engage PGH will work alongside those traditional events to provide even broader access to participate in all city projects. We want it to be the citywide spot for all projects. And so while many of the initial projects on the site today come from city planning, residents can expect to see projects from Public Works, from Mobility, from the Budget Office, and from the Permits, License, and Inspections Department as well in the coming month, so that they don't have to go to 6 or 7 different places to see what the city is working on right now.
That's terrific. So, and we'll have it in the chat, engage.pittsburghpa.gov, correct?
It is, yes.
It's a great URL structure. I've said it once, I'll say it again. I love that it's so simple in that way. What are some of the initial reactions that you've seen to this, and what are your kind of hopes for the future? It'd be great to have these different projects on there and live, but what do you think the future or the new normals look like given the initial reactions?
Yeah, I think the initial reactions is that it's a great place to go right now to participate in a time when it's hard to have any of those conversations. So our planners can have one-on-one conversations through Zoom or a phone call with a community organization, but it's hard to show up at the meetings and get input on a map of where people really need to see safety improvements or where they're having difficulties accessing food. And so this is a way that we can engage in that way during this time. And we've had people tell us ways that they get into parks or ways that they access Oakland through different modes of transportation. And so we can plan our updates to transportation paths for the Port Authority, or where we add accessible crosswalks for people, and make sure that all of our plans are truly improving the lives of Pittsburghers.
Yeah, that's terrific, and it really seems like the opportunity ahead of us. I've seen some national messaging around this idea of building back better, and here's an example of building better right now, and looking at what the new normals can be in the future. But how can you get started on that even during a pandemic? And so, Sophie, let's start to get down to the neighborhood level here. And now that we've kind of set the stage for here's what the department does, here are some of the new tools, here are engagement guides and how we think about it. When it gets down to the neighborhood level, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And you were the first person to kind of explain the idea of what a neighborhood planner is. So before we get to the specific communities, which we'll have a good time exploring for the rest of this call, could you start us off with a definition of what that role is on the team? And then we'll get into some of the specifics.
Yeah, so, and my connection cut for a moment. You said defining kind of what a neighborhood planner is.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So there's 8 neighborhood planners now. We just got another one, which is fantastic. And each of us work in about 10 to 15 city of Pittsburgh neighborhoods. To the sort of jargon line is that we manage all capital planning projects, or most capital planning projects, in those 10 to 15 neighborhoods. That doesn't mean a lot to most people. So what that means is that when you have a project in a neighborhood that is, it might be, so for example, I worked on the Broadway Avenue public realm in the South Hills. In the Beachview neighborhood. And that was a concrete set of funds to create streetscape improvements along Broadway Avenue, along the main street. But we needed the planning department to first lead a project to say, how should these funds be used? We don't want to just make executive decisions about streetscape improvements that would be best for this community. We want to have a process through which we talk to you all and we figure out, do you want picnic benches here? Do you want bike lanes here? How do you want public art to be displayed on the street? And so that's where we as planners can come in and have conversations with the public to establish vision and goals for larger projects as they relate to kind of land use. That often involves a lot of collaboration with other city departments, like our Department of Mobility and Infrastructure and our Department of Public Works. So as a neighborhood planner, I work in the South Hills and the West End. And then we also do projects in other areas as well, because it's really important for us to collaborate. And so on this call, we have 3 of the 8 neighborhood planners, and we're doing a lot of work, but we're not doing the actual construction. We're doing the talking about things, and then we refer off to the people who do the construction.
Makes sense. So talk to us about the Oakland plan that's happening right now. This is something that I've had a chance to take a small hand in recently, and has been fascinating to see the pivot to virtual, what the thought had been around community engagement, and now what it's looking like now. Can you just use that as an example to kind of tie in what we've been talking about, how we're using digital tools, how community engagement has continued to move forward given the realities of COVID, and what the pathway forward looks like from here?
Yeah, so the Oakland Plan is a neighborhood plan. Neighborhood plans are guided by the Neighborhood Plan Guide that is currently under development or kind of being implemented by the department, which is a huge topic for another day, but it's a great resource and establishes sort of a standard through which we do neighborhood plans. If anyone wants to go and explore those another time, we could probably put the link in the chat. But the Oakland Plan is using this Neighborhood Plan Guide framework to create a 10-year plan for a shared vision for Oakland's future and the projects and programs necessary to make that vision a reality. That is a lot of work. We are looking at sort of 4 key buckets within which we're doing that work. Those are community development, mobility, and infrastructure. And I, Josiah, have the joy of working with you on the community action team. So to approach this process, we started with a steering committee. This is a common process that most planning projects start with. And that steering committee has actually been meeting for 10 months at this point. Our original plan in April was to host a series of block parties to introduce people to these 4 topics that we're going to do the analysis within, and invite them to engage on those 4 topics in a longer term way. Obviously, we were not doing any block parties in April. And so we kind of took a step back and we said, okay, we need to reassess and we need to do this well. This is really important, and we're going to be establishing some sort of precedent for how other neighborhood plans might do this, as my colleagues are going to talk about their own projects that maybe happened before COVID or after COVID and are upcoming, things like that. And we were looking to online engagement. The important thing was we wanted members of the community to be able to talk to each other. We didn't want people just talking at us or us to be talking at people. And oftentimes when you're doing traditional online surveys, you can't see what your neighbor posted and you can't respond to what your neighbor posted. And so that was a really important piece for us in this transition into online engagement, was we needed to have a space through which we could create an online community. One of the things that's quite great about the online environment as well is it makes it really straightforward for us to establish the lines that connect the different topics. You can't talk about mobility in a vacuum next to development. When you have, in Oakland, a large apartment building going up on Forbes Avenue, they're going to redo the sidewalk, and that's going to impact mobility and transportation and pedestrian experience. And so when we were doing in person, it was actually almost more siloed. And one of our goals with the online engagement is that we're creating this community and we're creating connections across topics. And I think that so far we're doing okay on that front, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Agreed. And the joy is mine, Sophie. It's been a lot of fun to learn about this realm of work and to take a small part. And it's been fascinating because so much of life before, you're going to community meetings as you're describing, or perhaps like a block party kind of idea, and it's like a hard stop on all of that, but the project are still ongoing. So it's great to have things like Zoom and the ability to pick up a phone and call and engage with residents. But now we have a chance for them to continuously engage in different ways. And when folks go to the portal and as the new parts of the site become live, they'll see that it's not just a series of short form submissions. There's ways to engage with maps. There's ways to engage with categories and tags and stuff like that. And it can be a really dynamic experience. Chris, I'd like to turn to you and talk a little bit about your work. Given the conversation that you've heard so far, I'm curious where your mind goes in terms of describing your work in neighborhood planning. And then I'd love to jump into some of the details around what's been happening in Homewood. It's another part or area where I got exposed to some of y'all's work when I worked in the nonprofit space for the Homewood Children's Village, because the comprehensive plan and a lot of the associated conversations were happening at that time in the community, and there was a lot of attention around it. So the floor is yours. Where's your mind gone here in the conversation, and what's going on in Homewood?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh is made up of so many great, 90 to be exact, but so many great neighborhoods. And at a local level, the neighborhood plans are, no one else is better equipped to kind of plan out a neighborhood other than our neighborhoods. And so I think our department has been really smart into seeking neighborhood plans and having the feedback from the community and having those neighborhood plans being community driven. And so one common thread that I'm hearing throughout equity and city planning and neighborhood plans, and even our engagement, is that consistent practice of just being inclusive, right? And so when we're identifying inequities throughout our cities and our neighborhoods, we're also thinking about what department and authority should we be collaborating with to kind of dive into more of a diverse stakeholders and to find more resources to really create some type of resolve, right? Yeah. And then we move directly into creating some policies and programs that will ultimately lead to that change and to foster some equitable changes. And then we also will love to just follow up and check in and really measure how our policy changes and other changes are kind of impacting our community. And so with the Homewood plan, I was actually fortunate enough to inherit the plan. I'm coming up on a year with the department now, and we had an implementation plan. So we've done all this work, we've done all the research, we've done all the outreach in the community, and we had the plan be adopted in June. That was in the midst of COVID-19. And so, and on top of that, we have like this larger conversation about racial justice and injustice that's happening throughout the country. And so with our implementation plan, we now understand that what we had works, but we can even make it work a lot better. So we're in the process now of creating an implementation plan that kind of responds directly to the recovery that we're going to have to do, as well as some of the inequalities that we are seeing in our housing, our parks, our ADA community, our LGBTQ community. I mean, there's so many stakeholders and residents that we have here in Pittsburgh that we have to be inclusive of, and we're trying to do our very best to do it all. So
I appreciate that. I'd like to just stay with the operations in Homewood just for a quick second. It's a unique example among the ones that we've talked about so far. And Hazelwood coming up is another unique example in its own right. But here you have this community with extraordinary history. It goes back a long time. It's about 1 square mile, around 6,400 residents. And when I was there had already been, to your point, like this groundwork that had been done. And I remember hearing things like block clusters and stuff. And these had been articulations of what could potentially be done, and community input and desires and preferences, down to like, I don't know if parcel is the right nomenclature to use, but down to like specific sections of the community. And then there was this talk of, there was this comprehensive plan, and now I hear you saying implementation plan. So what is it, when you can kind of get down to this micro level with the community, when we're looking at the implementation, what are some of the things that you'll be looking at executing on, and what's your take on how on like the ongoing community engagement? Because something else that I realize is that you have this relatively small community, but there is distinct neighborhood identity within it, down to like a specific street of strong, long-standing community and like neighborhood identity, and that has not only influence but has been actively engaged in this case. So where does your mind go with that kind of
yeah, Homewood is definitely set up for success, from having really strong community groups such as Operation Better Block that kind of engage their residents in a way that is broken up into the clusters in which you spoke about, to having an established RCO, which is the Homewood Community Development Corporation. And it's made up of probably around 10 different organizations that do work in Homewood. Yeah. And so you have a lot of care there, and they've done the base of the work into kind of streamlining what it is that they want to see. So Operation Better Block kind of took a look at land use along with city planning. And so this plan, our neighborhood plan, kind of amplified that, where we didn't focus simply on place, but on person. So it's a person-driven plan. So we take a look at a lot of policy. Some of the policy that's coming out in the implementation plan, and Director Dash kind of hinted to it, but it's more of like land use and things that city planning is known for. So like land use, zoning, from city-owned properties, and ways to kind of remedy that and find a better way to serve the community in general. And so, we have a food insecurity planner, Shelly Dandeco Day. She's taking a look at different food policies that we can incorporate. And so that goes back to like how this is such a collaborative effort, meaning that we're pulling everyone at the table, including all of our stakeholders, to really find out how can we create, not how can we only identify these inequities, but how can we actually create some resolve that will propel this community to perform just as much as they want to perform. That was actually identified in their plan, their comprehensive community plan.
Yeah, it's super fascinating because it's one of these, it's contrast, right? Here you have the intention and the opportunity for longitudinal impact. You're talking about a 20, 30-year time horizon. And yet in the midst of this conversation to the work that Shelley's doing, which I didn't know, that's terrific. You're also talking about meeting the basic needs and the immediate needs of the community as you're talking about all of this stuff. And that's really one of the reasons I think the work that you all do is so fascinating, because there is this rigor, there is this expertise, this technical component to it. And yet at the end of the day, you're talking about people and with people about where they live and what life has been like. And I think that's super fascinating. Can you talk to us about the visioning studies that are taking place right now? What are those, and what are some of the notable ones that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, so I'm very excited about this as well, as I am with all of my projects. But the community visioning study is happening, we're having two at the same time. It's happening in East Hills and Lincoln Leamington. We're in the very, very beginning stages, but what that will ultimately do, it is pre-planning work, getting the vision of the community members and stakeholders to the forefront before we try to create some type of plan for a community. And so again, this is where DCP and the city of Pittsburgh gets it right, where we're putting in the driver's seat our community first. It's not a top-down approach. And so we're working with East Hills, Lincoln Leamington. Our consultant is E Holdings, which is a local firm, planning firm here in the city. And we're going to put together our visioning study. We'll put together a steering committee. We'll be doing all of our engagement as of today online. We're using the Engage PGH platform to share information. Viewers can definitely go in and check some of the surveys that we'll have there. We'll be doing polling and more information about just our community meetings and to get a better understanding of what it is that we're doing. That project, or this project, should last probably roughly around 6 to 9 months. But the ultimate goal of it is to have a visioning statement that is produced by the community that kind of propels us into doing a master plan for that community.
Is this something that Larimer had done? Did they have like a visioning process that let them articulate their community goals?
Yeah, Larimer did a plan. They did their, they have a plan. It predates the neighborhood plan guide, if you will. I know they're doing their choice. They're wrapping up their choice phases. I believe they're in phase 3 now, where they are, as you can tell, like doing a lot of development and rezoning and taking a look at some of the land use that they have there too.
Okay, thank you so much. Osei, I'd like to turn to you as well. I'm interested in where your mind goes here in the conversation, any common threads you have come to mind. But then I'd love to talk about your work and how you describe it to folks before we dive into some of the neighborhood specifics.
Sure, I would just really like to echo my colleagues per se, just because, like, of course, when you think of planning and government in general, just those systemic inequalities that you think about in planning, and just how we are just really trying to change that narrative. And I would just like to praise my colleagues and all of the work that we are doing here in DCP. Just thank you. Just say it like that, just because I believe that we love what we do, and it shows. And then just identifying the difference between equality and equity, and how the neighborhood plan guide like identifies the equality or sets up equality within this process, but then us working, like Christopher was saying, not from the top down, but that makes it a equitable process. Just because the PEG, or planning education, public engagement guide, that makes it an equitable process, just because it ebbs and flows and changes with every neighborhood, because every neighborhood is different, and the planners, the way that we work with neighborhoods and so on and so forth, like it is an ever-changing process. So that's just what I would like to add to this.
Terrific, thank you so much. There was a term that Christopher mentioned, RCO, Registered Community Organization. How would you explain that idea to those that might be watching the broadcast?
So the Registered Community Organization is a
Yeah, it looks like you're muted. Oh, there we go.
Sorry. So the Registered Community Organization is a program for community organizations that have the capacity to, they are organizations that have the capacity to work within neighborhoods. It's a program that was legislated in 2018.
Recent thing.
Andrew, could you come on?
2018, yes.
Okay.
And we started implementing registered community organizations in 2019.
Thank you. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. So the registered community organizations, what we wanted to do was be able to set up, a framework so that community organizations could be able to have more of a say in development issues that are going on in their neighborhood. So the way that the public process worked before is that if there was a development that was coming to your neighborhood, the only public process was downtown. And that was, at our building at 200 Ross Street with, the planning commission or the zoning board or one of the other boards or commissions. And, and part of the role of the registered community organizations is that now part of that public engagement occurs in the neighborhood with those registered community organizations. And so really trying to connect developers and applicants looking to do work in neighborhoods with those neighborhoods before they're coming for their approvals, and being able to hopefully have that happen earlier in the process so that communities can come to those boards and commissions and have more of an informed say as to what it is that they want to see. And in addition to that, in conjunction with the neighborhood planning program that we've set up with the mayor, the intention of the registered community organization program was that whether registered community organizations wanted to work with the city planners that you see here and the city leading a neighborhood planning process in their neighborhood, or that registered community organizations wanted to work with us where they were leading a neighborhood planning process, if they have the capacity to be able to do so, that we would be able to work with them to create those neighborhood plans that then would be adopted by the city.
Got it. Thank you so much. So what's the role of that in the work that you've been doing? And then I'd love to start talking about Hazelwood specifically, another really unique community and neighborhood.
Sure. So for myself, as well as Sophie, who's here on the line, that's a major role for the equity work that we've been doing within the department, just because we just want to ensure that registered community organizations are equitable throughout the city, just because not every organization throughout the city has the capacity to become a RCO. And we just want to evaluate that through using that through the work with the Office of Equity, and then just using that as a means of assessment for equity throughout the city. So we can elaborate on that a bit more in our next session.
Yeah, we'll do a deeper dive, a little bit of a teaser. We're going to do another conversation with city planning and get into some of the nitty gritty details, because as is very clear, not only is there a lot of passion and enthusiasm about this work from the folks on the call, there's a lot of details that we could wade through and really pick apart like what this actually looks like at the micro level, so to speak. So let's talk about Hazelwood. How would you describe that community in terms of in terms of this work for those that might be watching, and what have been the realities kind of, pre some of these planning guides and engagement guides and now?
Sure. So I actually joined the department in January of 2019, and that was prior to both the public engagement guide and the neighborhood plan guide being adopted. And I took on that plan from consultants, and myself and another planner were working on that document in-house, and it was not as structured as it would have been with these documents and guides. So it was a bit different. And as you know, like every neighborhood is different. And Hazelwood, love them. I don't know if anyone are watching, but I love you guys. That's just how I am. I'm sorry. That's just how I am. But Hazelwood is, of course, just like every other community, they are very, very unique. And we stepped into this process and it was a bit augmented in the sense that they were, again, like it wasn't a top-down approach, but they were right on the forefront with us, writing this plan right there with us. And having these documents, of course, we utilized them and we put this framework, the action teams, they were not aligned with these documents where it was just the community, infrastructure, mobility, action teams that were within these documents prior to, and we didn't have the informed consult and all of that prior to as well. But we utilized that towards the end of the process to make it fit as pieces, and then trying to move it forward into this implementation phase, which has been very helpful. However, as we were drafting out this plan and then moving it into adoption, it was very difficult. Well, not difficult, but it was a different process because the community, we had to use a different approach. And that was just the difference there.
Got it. Hazelwood is surprisingly, well, it was surprising to me. I used to serve Meals on Wheels there back in my nonprofit life. And I remember going to a bunch of community meetings to pitch those services and to engage with seniors and folks there. And even then, there was a bunch of conversation around development and around climate and around environmental justice and things like this. And it was a really interesting window. And at the time, I was told that it was about 50-50 Black residents and white residents, which was not something that I knew about the community. Can you speak a little bit to those dynamics, Osei, and then give us the new tools? You know, what's the augmented approach look like now?
Sure. So you're absolutely right. The community's demographics are a bit different. Like, of course, like they are still considered a minority community in a sense, Black and Brown community, and then also, greater than 50% of their population is over the age of 55, and then beyond that, about a greater percentage is under the age of 18. So the demographics there are a bit different as well. So looking at that, moving into how we engage them moving forward, that was definitely a conversation that we had to have. And speaking about Engage PGH, like that's why this platform is definitely something that is needed moving forward, because like it's like Sophie was saying, part of me there, it's a low barrier to entry because it's easier for the older population to use. And then of course, we know majority of the population, since they are younger, they will be able to utilize it. However, if they do not have the means to communications there, which was also looked at, thank you to Alex and Sophie, that was also something that they researched while they were looking into Engage PGH. If they don't have a means to access, then how will they be able to access that? But then also the residents of Hazelwood Initiative, and Center of Life, and many of the churches there, like they are making sure that their residents have those means to access, of course, the internet and so on and so forth. And of course, Engage PGH. Plug.
So you're also involved with the Greater Hill District Master Plan. This is upcoming, so another plug. What's the deal there? What's the current deal there?
So right now we have the Greater Hill District Master Plan request for proposals out through the URA for economic development and urban design consultants, and that closes on August 25th. So if you're listening, please go and check that out. And we are just having staff meetings at this point, and hopefully that process will begin this fall. So keep an eye out for that.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So I'd like to just open it up to everybody to bring this conversation towards its end. One of the things that I'm picking up on in this conversation is that contrast that we mentioned earlier, where you have, all of this institutional knowledge and rigor, you have the chance for longitudinal impact, and then you have also this very real opportunity and I think responsibility to engage around the needs of the residents and as you're doing this. And that might be basic needs. I remember hearing about food deserts and stuff working in Hazelwood, but it also might be, to your point, digital needs, digital divide and stuff like that. So how do you all, we have engaged PGH now, which is great. We have things like Zoom. If we're thinking about community engagement, how are we making it more accessible? What does that actually look like through the context of these plans? So for example, Sophie in Oakland, we have these great new tools and stuff like that. But if someone were to ask, how are you being intentionally and iteratively accessible? How would you all answer that question for anybody?
I mean, I think it is a focus of the department, and especially as we start all of these new programs and projects, to make sure that we have the most accessible process as we can from the start. We want to make sure that whether it's digital or whether it's an in-person event, that like the accessibility and the equity of that singular event is the best that it can be from the city.
And just to add on to what Alex is saying and relate to the Engage PGH platform, although, we talked a lot about, the accessibility through the website, I just also want to plug that, we do have a connection with the 311 team. So folks who want to be able to engage in city projects, but may not be able to access the website, have the ability to access that through 311. We're looking to be able to add texting services in the near future to the site as well. But and in our research as we were developing the site, one thing that we learned is that it's not that people don't have access to it's not that most Pittsburghers don't have access to the internet. It's just that they may have limited access to the internet. They may have a cell phone that has a data plan. And so, we needed to create a variety of opportunities. So whether it's something that somebody can just very quickly access on their phone and not use much data, that they can do that. Or if it's someone wanting to be able to access a Zoom meeting like this one or another one that is more data heavy, that there are a multitude of ways that people can engage with us. That really depends on, so no matter what their access, that we're able to listen to them.
Appreciate that.
And just to add to our digital engagement platform, I have noticed through a lot of the engagement that I'm doing in the East End, and when it is on Zoom or if there's another platform like a digital platform, I'm noticing that we're actually reaching out to a larger group of attendees. And so typically what I was saying when we were doing just face-to-face meetings, that we'll get like the neighborhood group that will show up every month. And now we're actually able to widen that net and like draw in some newer residents that aren't that familiar with, but definitely want to know about what's happening in the communities and neighborhoods. We're able to find hard to reach residents. And so those who have childcare needs or, that can do it at their own pace. We're also seeing an older population as well, an aging population that is actually very active on our digital platforms too.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing that I would add is that we've been talking a lot about how the platform increases accessibility to engagement. The other thing that it does, though, and that's a fantastic step forward for the city, but the other thing that it does is it enables us to have some very explicit conversations around topics of racial equity and other sort of really pressing topics in the world today. Oftentimes in public engagement, you go into a public meeting, you have a very specific thing you need to accomplish, you have a limited amount of time to accomplish it, you're trying to be really respectful of people's time, you don't want to ask them to be there more than 1 to 2 hours, they don't want to be there more than 1 to 2 hours. And so it can be really hard to have open-ended conversation. And there's also, engagement is not always something that people are trained on. And so there's this fear of, if anyone has watched Parks and Rec, there's the Leslie Knope, sort of like the angry town hall style public meeting. That's what we all think of. And, one of the things that I've been challenging myself to do is to say that the traditional public meeting is what we think we have to do, but no one's telling us we have to do that. It's not a requirement. And so with this online world, we can sort of flip that on its head and open the door for these really open-ended conversations and just let people give us input. They don't need to be experts. They don't need to know, oh, this comment I have on whatever topic it is ascribes specifically to this one project within this one department on this one street. That's asking a level of expertise from the public that maybe they don't have. And they shouldn't have to become an expert in order to contribute that. And so these open-ended questions we're able to pose are going to allow us as city staff to look and see these really broad comments and then ascribe them to the relevant projects and the relevant project managers, and hopefully help those comments go a lot farther and facilitate some really powerful community conversation. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to with this project and the digital engagement opportunities that are forthcoming.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. I guess we should probably bring the conversation to a close. Looks like we're just over an hour here, and it's very clear that we could talk about this stuff all day. And as we mentioned, we're going to do a deeper dive on some of these comments. Just some final encouragements for you all. I'd like to open it back up to the table, so to speak, to the Zoom room one last time. Any final encouragements for people? This could be about your work or just general life during COVID or in Pittsburgh during this era, or just something you'd like to plug about the work coming up in terms of something you're excited about.
All right, I'll jump in. Yeah, so I think we're really, with our neighborhood plans, I mean, we've talked a lot more around the engagement side, so I'll move to the neighborhood plans. I think we're really excited to being able to work with this first phase of neighborhood plans, as I think Christopher and Osei had stated, in making things happen in the neighborhoods. So whether that's changing zoning and land use regulations because neighborhoods want more affordable housing, to thinking about how we start to affect how some of the institutions in some of these neighborhoods where we have these neighborhood plans, they have master plans, how we start to affect that to really fit those with the community's vision, or how, Osei, when she was working in Hazelwood, one of the things that they had kind of noted was, they have high asthma rates, they have higher particulate matter, we need to work on planting trees and working in the greenway because there are higher rates of diabetes, trying to think through those things, those improvements that can be made that really do affect the people that live there, and that the people that live there really told us were the things that they wanted to see. And then, I think to some of the stuff that Christopher talked about as well, in places like Lincoln, Leamington, or in East Hills, really starting the conversation in some of these communities that aren't as organized. And so, there's a reason why Christopher talked about, kind of the organization in Homewood and the way that the community is organized in Homewood, and was able to come to the table a little bit easier with what they wanted to see than a place like East Hills or Lincoln, Leamington, where there's still work to be done in trying to get the community to organize, to then be able to tell us what they want. And to be able to get to just that broad vision is really important, so that down the road we can be working on, on neighborhood plans with those communities as they start to come together, identify what those things, those big picture items are that they want to see and what they see their community becoming. So, I think just really excited to take on this work, and really excited for not only the group that's on this call, but the rest of the team to be able to make that happen.
Terrific. Thank you, Director. Anybody else? Everyone doesn't need to speak. That's no pressure here, but just any final encouragements for folks that might be watching.
I guess one thing would just be to echo what Director Dash has said, and to continue that we are all in this together. We are here to support the residents of all of the neighborhoods, and we want to hear what the residents need and want for their neighborhood to make the city better for all of us.
And to just say also that we are your neighborhood planners. So we are accessible for you and to you. So if you need us to, of course, reach out. We are accessible, just that.
Yeah, not just an empty suit behind the desk, someone you can actually talk to. Yeah, that's terrific.
Maybe we can sort of challenge people and say, I'm a young person, public meetings are not fun, they're not trendy, they're not how you want to spend your Thursday night. Most of my friends have never been to public meetings, and I'm constantly shaming them and saying, you're my friend, you should go to a public meeting. I lead public meetings. And I think, this is a fantastic opportunity to kind of dip your toe in the water. And as a member of the public, and we're at a time in America when people are involved and people care about government and they can see the impact that policies are having from a local to a national level, dip your toe in, go to a public meeting, and you don't actually have to go anywhere now. You can do it from your home. So try to tick that off your COVID bucket list. That's my challenge to close us out.
I love it. Yeah, it might not be the most immediately obvious place that people might think of to get civically engaged, but it is available to them. And I just want to echo that sentiment. 8 years I spent in the nonprofit space, and that entire time, 2 friends came to one event that I was involved with during that entire time. And yet we were doing things, continuously. And here's an example where you have, down to the neighborhood level, people that are there to speak with you. To serve the residents' needs, to engage with them, trying to get it right, trying to get it better. There are more tools than ever. There's more accessibility than ever, and we're trending in the right direction. And I hope folks that have taken the chance and the opportunity and the time to view this conversation feel at least encouraged about that. We have an enthusiastic team and a really good team. So I will bring this conversation to a close. Thank you all so very much for taking the time, whether you're in the person or checking this out online after the fact. Please check out the comments for links to the various things that were mentioned, or Google/search for these neighborhood planners and personnel to engage with them directly. I want to say thank you to our 2 ASL interpreters who have been along for the ride, making sure that this conversation is accessible, and to the City Channel team for helping us put together this broadcast. We will continue this series, another one with a deeper dive with city planning folks and other buckets of city activity coming up soon, so please be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, please take the very best care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.